Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Sabrina and I'm back with another Excel tutorial for you. Now, if this is your first time here and you're looking to develop your Excel skills, then start now by subscribing and hitting that bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new videos. All right, so in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create drop-down lists in Excel. Drop-down fields are very useful because it allows people to pick an item from a list that you create. So if you look at my spreadsheet here, you can see, for example, in column D, I've got a list of food categories. Now, there are 5 specific food categories that I have, okay? And creating a drop-down field for this kind of data is ideal because especially if you're working with other people on the spreadsheet, using a drop-down field restricts different entries of data. So sometimes what happens is when you're sharing your file with other people, um, sometimes people would, for example, enter in, categories and spell them incorrectly. So for example, instead of putting in crackers, they might just put cracker in there without the S, and that just messes up the data. Okay, sometimes people put extra descriptive words in the categories as well. So to standardize your data and to keep it the same, drop-down fields can be very useful because you're restricting the ability for people to enter in variations and you're giving them limited options to choose from. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you how you can delete a drop-down list in Excel. Now, the reason for that is because I've already got drop-down fields in column D. Okay, now how do I know that? Because, well, if you select one of the cells in column D, you'll see a little drop-down arrow in the bottom right-hand corner. And that drop-down arrow is basically a drop-down field. So if you click on that drop-down arrow, you'll see my 4 options of food categories that I can select. And let me show you another tip here. So if somebody entered in an option or a category that was not part of the drop-down list. So for example, say they misspelt cookies, so maybe they spelt it as, you know, and forgot to put the I in, okay? Now if I click away from that cell, I instantly get an error message prompting me that this value does not match the data validation restrictions. So I have to try again. So if I close this box now, okay, I have to re-input my value. So that forces you to choose an option from the list and not type any other text or type anything incorrectly. Okay, so let me first show you how you can delete this drop-down list, and then I'll show you how to insert a drop-down list using 2 different methods. All right, so to delete this, it's pretty simple. Now for this example, I'm just going to take the first 10 cells in that column, and I'm going to delete the drop-down fields here. So what you do is you would select the cells that has the drop-down fields that you want to delete. You would go up to the Data tab, and then you want to go to the Data Tools group. All right. Now you'll see a little list image with a green tick and a red no entry sign over it. So that's the data validation command. So when you hover your mouse over it, it tells you that data validation allows you to pick from a list of rules to limit the type of data that can be entered in a cell. Okay, so if you click on the drop down arrow just on the right of that command, you would click on data validation. So that's the first one on the list. Okay, now what you'll see here is that under the settings tab, my drop-down fields have already been configured, okay? Because if you look under allow, you can see the list is selected, and then under the source field, okay, I've got my list of options already manually entered in there. So this tells me that my drop-down field is configured. Now, if I wanted to remove my drop-down option or my drop-down list, all you would do here is you would click on clear all in the bottom left-hand corner. So when you click clear all, what you'll see is that your validation criteria, okay, resets. All right. So if you now click OK, you'll now notice that when you click back into the D2 cell, you can no longer see the drop-down arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of that cell. Okay, so that's because these cells are no longer drop-down fields, they've been removed. All right, so that's how you remove drop-down fields from your Excel spreadsheet. Now, let's have a look at how we could insert a drop-down list into our spreadsheet. All right, so I'm going to redo the drop-down list in the top 10 cells. So again, you would select your cells where you want to add the drop-down list option. You would then go again back up to the Data tab and then go to the Data Tools group. All right, and then just click back into Data Validation command. So just click on the drop-down arrow on the right of Data Validation and select Data Validation again. So that will take you into the same dialog box, the Data Validation dialog box. And now you can set up your drop-down list. So you want to go into the settings field, okay? And then under the allow field, you want to click on the drop-down list and select list because we want a list of options. And then under source, you want to put your list of options in there. Now there's two things you can do here. The first is that you can manually enter in your options and separate your options with commas. All right, so what I mean by there is you literally just type them in. So I'm just going to put in the first one, which is cookies. Then you would put a comma in. Then you would put in the next option, which is bars. Then a comma again. Then the next option, which is crackers. Okay, and then I'll just put snacks as well. Okay, so you can manually enter in your list of options in the source field. Now, alternatively, what you could do is you could add these options into a separate worksheet and reference those cells in that source field. So I'll show you how to do that as well. But for now, we're going to just manually enter them into the source field, and then you would click OK. And when you click OK, you'll find that now in those top 10 cells, when you select the first cell, you'll see it, the drop-down arrow has reappeared. So this is now back to a drop-down field. Okay, and I can see my 4 options there reappearing. All right, so that's how you insert drop-down lists into Excel. Now, the other method that I was talking about, which was having your options entered into a separate worksheet. So what you would do there is, if you look at my tabs here, I've created a worksheet called drop-down options, all right? And I've basically just added the food categories, the options for the food categories here, okay, just in a list. Now, the benefit here is that if you go back to your food sales spreadsheet here, okay, and just select your first 10 cells again, and go back up to the Data tab, and then go to the Data Tools group and click on Data Validation again. Okay, so I'm back into the Data Validation dialog box here. Okay, and as you know, my data validation criteria has already been configured, okay, which I did earlier. Now, in the source, you can see that I've manually entered in my options. But what I could do is I could delete my manual options, my manual entries, and I can select the cells where my options have been entered into a separate worksheet. So if you click on this little black arrow here, this will minimize your data validation window. And then you can go to your worksheet with your drop-down options and select the cells with your options there. Now, what you can do here is when you're selecting your cells, you can also select a few more extra cells. Okay, Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because maybe down the line in the future, you might end up adding more food categories. So instead of manually changing your data validation criteria every time, all you would need to do in this scenario is add the extra categories in this worksheet, okay? And that will automatically reflect in your drop-down list, okay? Because your source is referencing extra cells there. All right, so it's referencing all the way from A2 down to A11. Okay, so you've still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra cells. So you've got an option of adding 5 extra categories, which will automatically be reflected in your drop-down list. Okay, so you would then click back onto the drop-down arrow on your data validation window. This will expand that window for you. Okay, so you'll see that you're under your source field, you've now got the cell reference range in there, the cell range in there, and then you would click OK. So when you click OK, and if you click into the first cell in column D, again, you've still got your drop-down arrow there, okay? And if you click on the drop-down arrow, you can see your 4 options. But what you'll see now is you've got blank spaces underneath it. And that's because we referenced extra cells in our source field. So what that means is, say, for example, in the future, I end up adding another category. So let's add an extra one here called nuts. And I've also noticed that the first one here is incorrect. It's called category, which is wrong. So I'm just going to replace that one and I'm going to add fruit in there, fruits. Okay. Now you can put a border around. So I'll just quickly put a border around this cell range. Okay, so now if you go back to your food sales spreadsheet and if I click back into the drop-down list, you'll now see that my first option there has been replaced. Okay, so it's changed from category to fruits. And my extra one that I had added at the bottom, which was nuts, is also now appearing as part of my drop-down list. Okay, so that was it for this video. I hope that's helped. If it's been useful, please do like and share the video so that you can reach out to more people, and do consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on any new videos. All right, guys, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.